talk about what causes it. And we also talked about some of the things it can actually do. We talked about how it can bring out the worst of us, how it can cause us to do things that we normally would not do. It can cause us to become vocal to the point to where we begin to talk about other people, spreading lies, gossip, and sometimes even hatred and bitterness begin to come out of our mouth. For the simple reason, I'm doing the tie here, just because of the simple reason that our anger is building up within inside us. We also started looking at, and we did not finish, that it can cause us to want to spread strife and contention to other people. We all know people that when they get mad and when they get angry, they can't have it. They don't like it when somebody else is in the same area with them is in a good mood. They always have to contaminate it with something. In my family, my sister is the world's worst. If she sees somebody who's happy or having a good time when she's mad, she's got to do something to bring the rain cloud in on that circus, whatever it is. In fact, in Proverbs chapter 21, verses 19, it says, "It is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman." And although Solomon's focused on women, you got to realize he had, 300 wives, or 700 wives and 300 concubines, or some number like 1,000 women is what he had. That's what he knew. But we're going to see that contention is not something that's just stuck to women. There are very contentious men out there as well. A contentious person is somebody that enjoys creating conflict. They thrive. They love it when there's something else going on that they can witness. It doesn't matter to them what harm they cause. They just want to hesitate. They want to start a fight so that the pressure's off of them, so they get to enjoy things for a while. You talk about how somebody you know is like that, always trying to create drama and strife where there should be none. And that's what these people do. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 22, it says, "An angry man stirreth up strife, and a furious man aboundeth in transgression." And we have to come to the understanding there are just some people that are not happy unless they're angry. I'm not one of these people. I can't walk around here looking for people to make upset to make me happy. But there are people that just simply enjoy being angry. They enjoy that raw emotion. They enjoy trying to pit two people against each other or watch them fight. And we're going to see that when our anger grows and it goes into the fury mode, it does become blinding. We can no longer distinguish between right and wrong. We become bent on revenge and seeking what we see as justice, simply not realizing that what we're doing in our attempts to take the pressure off of us or to get even, we're simply making things worse. And we've all seen people, I was like this at one point in my life, to where if I felt somebody wronged me, I was going to make sure they paid for it. And the problem is sometimes I would hurt other people in the process of trying to get even with the person that I was going after. And when we have that kind of attitude, it really is a bad thing. And it's easy because sometimes people will hurt us and they'll do things to us, and we think, oh, we're completely justified in those feelings. And what we're saying is God's not saying that, we shouldn't have these feelings. It's the way that we deal with them that's going to cause the problems. In Proverbs chapter 30, verse 33, I realize we did finish this part last week. It says, "Surely the churning of milk bringeth forth butter, and the wringing of nose bringeth forth blood. So the forcing of wrath bringeth forth strife." And what we mean when we say bringing forth strife, like they do here in the Old Testament, is trying to convince others that our anger is justified, and in the process trying to get them to help us to set things in our mind what is supposed to be right. A good example is what's happening in the news with Ferguson. You got these people saying, oh, this is proof that America is still a racist and bigoted nation. And so they're trying to convince all these people that at this point what needs to happen is we need to somehow go in and have a separate court system for blacks, a separate police department in every city that just deals with black crimes. And they're trying to get these people to go with them, not realizing the damage is going to happen if they actually do get their wish. Can you imagine the expense of Henderson as a city would go up if you have to have a black sheriff's department, a black police department, a black court system, a black jail? Now, all of a sudden the expenses for everything goes up, and so now you've got a few people who are now going to cause greater discontentment and anger on a broader base. But see, in their mind, all they're focused about is getting what they want, getting their justice. And sometimes we're short-sighted. What we think is justice is far from justice. It's just not just, it's just not right, because we are blinded. It can also cause us to enrage or stir up bad feelings or resentment in others. And I'm going to read out of Judges chapter 12, verse 4. Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim because they said, and this is what the whole battle is over here. Ye Gileads are fugitives of Ephraim, among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. And basically what this is a war being fought within Israel. I guess you could call it a civil war if you wanted to. But you had one group of people that were running their mouths about another group of people they didn't like. And somehow a small little thing, disagreement between two families, now has these two tribes of Israel going after each other. Imagine, if you will, let's say one of your cousins, and you get in a disagreement, okay? All the time. Probably, I mean, it happens in every family. You start to have this disagreement, and pretty soon the disagreement goes beyond just you and your cousin, and now his parents are fighting, and your parents are fighting, and then it goes beyond that. Now you got this part of the family fighting with this part of the family, and your poor grandparents are going, these are all our kids, what in the world happened? And this is exactly the situation here. All because somebody said something to somebody else they found offensive, and they want to make it right. And what we're going to see is this. It's because what someone had said about one of the families made up the tribe of Ephraim. Although we may never cause nations to go to war over what we say, we can cause deep division within families and between friends, to the extent, the point where friendships and relationships are destroyed, and at the very least they're strained. If you ever watched a family that's had to go through one of these big, huge family feuds, when they get back together, they're never really quite the same. You always have a level of distrust. You always have a little bit of suspicion about what their true motives are. They can buy you a birthday. Your cousin come and buy you a birthday present, give it to you and say, happy birthday, Bryce, I was wrong. And you're going to be like, thank you for the birthday present. In the back of your mind is, should I open this? Is it going to explode on me? You know? And it's hard to regain that trust after that trust has been destroyed. In 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 43, and the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the king. We also have more right in Daniel than ye. What then do ye despise us, that our advice should not be first had in bringing back our king? And the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. And what's happening here at this point is Israel's getting ready to divide. And you got one part that's saying, hey, this is our king. And the other part is, wait a minute, he's supposed to be our king. And what we're seeing here is that sometimes the words we say out of jealousy or hurt, which is what we have in this case here, provoke strong emotions in other people. It's not intentional most of the time. Most of the times it's unintentional. But there's times we cannot undo the action we cause by allowing our raw emotions or anger to flow out of our mouth. There's been times I have been talking, I admit fully, one of my big problems is I have a loose mouth. You make me mad, and I am not responsible for my brain's going to force out that mouth. I mean, it's going to be hurtful. And I have learned over time how to deal with that. There's times students come up to me and ask me a question at the college, and it may be something I just talked about, and what my mouth wants to say is, you stupid idiot, you weren't paying attention 5 minutes ago, was it? It's to you now, you know. But you can't do that. You can't just go ripping the heads off of people. And what we're going to see, especially in this case here, is that these words become harsh. They become so stirred up that even though they're supposed to be fighting for the same cause, they begin, their animosity, because one has claimed something the other one feels is theirs as well, begins to build, begins to cause anger, begins to cause wrath, begins to cause strife. And we look what happens at Israel later on after the death of Solomon and after, when his son takes over. Israel does blow apart. And a lot of people say it's this part here in 2 Samuel where this whole thing is beginning to come unravel. And in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, it says, a soft anger turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And when we're angry and we don't control what we say, and we let the flesh do whatever it wants to do out of our mouth, what we can see is we can actually stir up not only our own anger, but we can also stir up anger in other people. While we may not intend to, we can hurt those around us or cause them to have such strong emotions that it does strain the relationship we have with them. And what we're going to see is the flesh desires that we should win and persuade others to our point of view at all costs. Like I said, back in my family, my sister's one of these, that she has to be right at every cost. And it doesn't matter to her how wrong she may be. It doesn't matter how right she may be. She just has to have everybody agree with her. And when anybody disagrees with her, then she sets out to destroy them. She'll belittle them, she harasses them, and she keeps wearing at them and wearing at them and wearing at them and wearing at them until finally she either gives up or she's run them off. And you probably know people that are the exact same way. And what we're seeing is that when we allow our anger to cause us to become this way, we can actually exaggerate the real situation to the extent that what we've become mad at no longer resembles what the truth even is. There's times that Edie will come back from the nursery and she'll tell me, I'm mad at Maddie. Well, why are you mad at Maddie? Because she took the toy I was playing with. Okay, well, why did she take the toy you were playing with? I don't know. I was playing with it. Okay, Edie, but why was she mad at you? Well, I took the toy from her. Okay, but see, there's a good example. There's Edie. She's trying to get me to get mad, I guess, and go after Maddie, but she's leaving out the part that she took the toy from somebody else. And our anger, our wrath, can actually cause us to do that. And if we give in to unjustified anger, and people do this, and what I'm talking about here is nothing that you probably have not seen since you've been a Christian. If we give into our unjustified anger, it always brings about its own punishment. I mean, you do something to somebody else, and God's going to be right there to remind you that you shouldn't have done that. And often things that get set in motion when we react out of anger have consequences that cannot be undone. When we look at Job, for example, it said, "For wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slayeth the silly one." All it takes is to read the posts on Facebook or watch news, and you can see how this is played out almost all the time. How many times have we heard on Facebook about so-and-so's done me wrong, I'm going to get them back? And next thing you know, you read in the newspaper or you hear online where somebody from Harrison County was arrested for stabbing somebody else. It happens to be the two idiots you saw on Facebook. Those are consequences. There's some things you cannot undo. You cannot unstab somebody. You cannot unshoot somebody. I'm sure that Cain would love to have gone back and unkilled Abel if he could have. Okay? But there's...
Now that he calms down and thinks about it.
Yeah. I'm sure that there's that brief second before the Lord approached him, he probably thought to himself, man, I shouldn't have done that. How many times have we done stuff like that? We've done something that we know to somebody we shouldn't have done because we're Christians and we're better than that. And we do it anyway, and then we think to ourselves, shouldn't have done that. And we're going to see that how many times we heard about someone getting mad instead of getting even or making things right. They end up creating a situation that results in either their death or the death of a family member. There was a thing I was reading on the news channel last night on Fox News. There was a girl up in, I think it was Connecticut, that was trying out for the tennis team that the school had. And this tennis team is it's state championships for the high school division of tennis. And she had just started playing tennis like 6 months ago. And while she is good for somebody who's been playing 6 months ago, she did not make the tryouts because here's kids who've been playing, young girls have been playing tennis since they're 7 and 8 years old. I mean, can you imagine? You're carrying a tennis racket bigger than you are just about, at 7. But anyway, and she was so mad that she began stalking some of the people on the tennis team and doing things like telling them, look, if you don't do this, if you don't drop off the team and let me have a chance, I'm going to slice your car tires. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And it got to the point to where she actually tried to cut the tires of one of the girls who was on the tennis team. And when she cut the tires, one of those new types of tires, and the tire exploded pretty much. And it killed her. They found her dead in the parking lot. I mean, they said it was like the tire was at the proper pressure, that they're not blaming the girl who owned the car. But when she went to try to slice into the tire, it actually blew the knife off into her chest, kind of thing, kind of explosion kind of thing. I'm sure as that knife hit her, she was probably thinking this was not a good idea. And we laugh about that. But look how blind her rage had made her. To the extent that, come on. I wouldn't cut a car tire because I'm afraid of what happens if I cut my fingers accidentally. Because car tires are pretty deep hard things to cut. So anyway, she gave in to her wrath. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 19 actually says, a man of great wrath shall suffer punishment, for if thou deliver him, yet thou must do it again. And this seems common sense. But when you have somebody who's bent on vengeance, and let's say that you have a guy at school who comes up to you and says, man, I'm going to kick that dude's butt. And you talk him out of it. I'm not going to do it. Don't do it, man, because it's not worth it. You're going to get in trouble in this mess. What the Bible's saying here is you're going to have to come back and keep telling him that over and over and over again. Because in his mind, he's already set to do it. In his heart, he's already set to do it. And the Bible's saying that he's a man of great wrath. And all you're doing is prolonging what he's going to do. So almost it's like Solomon saying, look, step out of the way and let it happen. Why? Because he's bent on it. He's to the point of he's got to deal with that wrath. And God's warning us that to those who allow their anger and wrath to dominate them, they're going to receive the fruits of their actions, the fruits of their thoughts. Just because you're stopping it doesn't mean that he's not going to play it out eventually, because there's going to be one time you're not going to be there, and he's going to suffer the punishment for his own wrath. Because what happens if you're not there and you beat the other guy up, and then you got all the ramifications that happen after that. And what we're going to see is that sometimes when we intervene into someone who's bent on retaliation and retribution, we're not ending their anger. All we're doing is we're redirecting their attentions. Eventually their focus is going to return on whoever they're angry at. Right now we're dealing with issues with Edie, where I can redirect her, I can punish her for something, and lo and behold, 5 minutes later, guess what she's doing? The same thing she got in trouble for. And it's kind of an application of this verse here, although it's not with anger, it's with other things. But we can see that how that can really cause us problems when we do intervene, because you're just going to have to keep doing it. Once we've intervened once, it's going to be an ongoing process. And this kind of fits along with the other Sunday school lesson we had a while back. That's why you got to be careful who you hang around with. Because if you're ending up hanging around with somebody you're constantly having to intervene with their wrath to keep them on the straight line, there's somebody that eventually is going to take you down with them. Kind of scary stuff when you start thinking about it that way. I can tell you when I was in the Army, there was a lot of times that we would have to deal with court martials with guys who got a little bit wild at a party at a bar off base. And I can't tell you the number of guys that look, Sergeant, I was just there. I was a designated driver. He does this when he gets out of hand. But what was I supposed to do? Well, you should have got him out of there before he got that drunk, before he got that mad. That's what you should have done. But because he kept coming in and intervening and delaying, eventually got to the point where he was sucked right into the hole with them. And so we do see that. And then in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28, it says, "He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls." And that's kind of a weird verse when you think about it. How is somebody who doesn't have control over their emotions like a city that doesn't have any walls? Well, back at the time this was being written, when we think about cities today, it's not the same problem. You have people who would come in and raid cities and raid villages. And so very early on, man learned that you built walls and you put gates in these cities. And what happens is those walls in the cities protect you from the outside influences. It protects you from being harmed. And when we don't have control of our emotions, we don't have control of our anger, we're like a city that doesn't have any walls. Because all it's going to take is one more thing, boom, and your anger's lit. How many times have you already been having a bad day? You're already angry, you come home and Maddie starts. And it's something, when you look back in hindsight, it's something stupid. She wanted you to fix the ear on one of her stuffed animal dogs, or maybe she wanted you to read her a book. And it's something stupid, but it just anyway. That's a verse in practice. You were already irritated, you were already raw, you already didn't have control of your emotions, you're already set on edge anyway. And all it takes is a littlest outside thing to set off the fire that's inside. You know, we're taught from childhood, ideally, how to handle our emotions. I'm up there on the hill teaching college classes. I can tell you right now, I've got people who are in college classes who do not know how to handle their emotions. They get their feelings hurt, somebody says something to them, and they're instantly ready to go fight. And you know what? I mean, it's a demonstration of this verse here. They're raw, they're constantly on edge. And we're going to see that our parents, our other family members and friends demonstrate and reinforce emotional control. You know, we laugh about this, but Pastor shares the story about him getting mad and throwing tools all over his yard. You know, you said that Richard has done the same thing on a couple of occasions.
I've done it, he's done it.
Yeah.
Except we're having a tool sale.
But for the most part, though, your dad's a level-headed guy. He's demonstrating emotional control. I'm sure there has been times you have seen things that should have made him mad, and your dad just pretty much gives it the look.
Is it really worth it?
In his mind, that's exactly what he's doing. Is it worth it for me to get mad? What's it going to accomplish? And the thing is he's demonstrating you emotional control. How many times have you heard people tell you, oh, count to 10, it'll help? There's sometimes I just want to go, 5, 10.
Yeah.
You know,
Help.
Doesn't help. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to teach us emotional control. And when we come across somebody that has little to no emotional control, we're never sure how to respond to what they tell us or what they do, because we're not so sure what's going to come out of them. I had a good friend of mine when I was over at Carbondale. He was dating a woman that was prone to violence. And why anybody would stay in a relationship where you're getting beat up on a regular basis, I have no idea. And he was telling me one evening, he says, he said, I'll say something to her and she blows up. And I mean, he'd come to the office, and here it is July, August. He's wearing long sleeve shirts. When he's pulling up the sleeves, it looks like his arm has been in a fight with a tiger, And he never knows what sets her off. They constantly, these people walk around with their emotions on their sleeves, and they're carried away by the slightest little emotional disturbance. Anything that causes them to become uncomfortable or bitter or off of their routine sets them off. And we know people like this. And it's because they don't have emotional control. It leads to unjustified anger. It's one of the main things. It causes it. Wow, we're going to run out of Sunday school stuff before we run out of time. God also understands that we're emotional creatures, and we're often driven by how we feel. You realize how powerful emotions are? We laugh about it, but in Star Wars, you always have Yoda say, "Give in not to anger. It leads to the dark side." Right? And we laugh about that. But what we're seeing is that emotions are a large part of who we are. After all, God did make us, so who better understands our emotions than God? God also understands that at times, no matter how our best efforts, we will have unjustified anger. But God does have ways out for us. And we're going to start talking about this one, and we're going to get to a couple of scriptures and we're going to be done. Unjustified anger should not be what causes us to sin. In Psalms 37, verses 7 and 8, it says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil." And what God is telling us here through David, who wrote this psalm, is when we feel ourselves growing angry, take a minute and calm down. Count to 10 isn't such a bad idea. Remove ourselves from the situation if we have to. Because what we need to do is remind ourselves that God is with us as Christians and that God will handle the situation. In fact, and there's twice in the Bible, God tells us, "Vengeance is mine, I'll repay, saith the Lord." In other words, if so-and-so has wronged you, pray for them, forgive them, let God handle it. Because let me tell you what they've done to you may have been done in private. No one else may know it but you and maybe your mom and dad. But when God takes care of the issue, everybody's going to know that God's taking care of it. How many times have you seen that worked in somebody's life? I've seen it in my life a lot. In fact, this verse right here, this Psalms 37, 7 and 8, tells us not to even allow the circumstances to cause us to worry. I'm a worrywart. I really am. I worry about things that may never happen. In fact, there's a joke. Why pray when you can worry about it? But what does worrying really do?
Upsets you, makes you mad.
Upsets you, makes you mad. It takes energy. It plays with your emotions. And when we let these things eat at us, it's going to cause us to have all kinds of things that are going to be wrong with us. They're going to cause us to worry when those who do wrong us seem to prosper because God's in control. God tells us to cease from anger. Don't get mad about it. Don't let it worry you. Turn it over to God. Walk away from it. There are some things I've had to walk away from in my life. There's some people I've had to walk away in my life. Not for any other reason, but that I wanted the peace that God gives. And sometimes God will tell you, come out from among them. What did he tell the Hebrews when they're in Egyptian captivity? Come out from among them. What does he tell the Christians through the Apostle Paul? Come out from them. What did Jesus tell the disciples? Don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. Come out from among them. And so we see this, come away from the situation. Get out from what's holding you back. Get out from causing you to sin. Get out of what's causing you to have problems, is what God's telling us. And here, what he's telling us is, God's saying, I understand you're angry. I understand you're worried. You have every right to be, but let me handle it. Take my yoke upon you. There's been people, and I'll share a story that happened with me. When I was over in Carbondale, there was a guy that was also, he went to our church. He was a guy about a little same age as I am, and I was at the time. And what he would do is, he didn't have a car. He lived in a men's shelter. He dropped out of high school, joined the military. The military kicked him out because he was just, I don't know what this guy's issue was. But he was actually getting to the point where he was getting angry with me. And he was getting angry with me simply because he thought that God was giving me blessings that he should have had. He wasn't there to see the nights that I would spend struggling trying to study my materials so I would know for my test. He wasn't there to know the road that I'd already walked down. All he saw that I was getting blessed, and he was getting mad at me getting blessed. So he started going, he knew that I worked on campus. He actually worked on campus too as part of the, he'd just been hired as part of the janitorial crew. And I came across him one day at University Housing, and somebody had told me, right before I met him, that he was spreading gossip and lies about me. Because everybody told him, oh wow, well you go to that church, well you got to know Alan. And he just got tired of hearing everybody bring up me. And it's kind of funny because eventually he did come to University Housing and did start working in family housing where I was at. And he couldn't handle it that here I was, still in school, but I was an associate, I was the assistant manager for the housing complex where I was at. And what I did is I basically took care of the renters who were renting student housing on the family level. And he thought he should have been in that job. And it got to the point to where I actually told Pastor, so I can't pick him up for church anymore. I said, he's causing me problems at work, and I can't do it. My pastor said, you know what, just walk away. Because you've done all you can do. He goes, you've reached out to him. He says, it sounds like to me that you're wanting to handle this God's way. Because I mean, I could have had him fired from his job for what he was doing, because it was violating university policy. But instead of getting angry at him, I just told God, I said, God, you handle us. You handle God. So anyway, I quit picking him up. The pastor started picking him up for church. And you know, it's one of those things that when I took my step back and I said, God, you handle it. This is your fight, God. You know what I've been trying to do. God did things very publicly to him that he had been doing to me. Well, just so come to find out that the pastor had been picking him up for about 2 weeks. Pastor went there one Sunday, and the lady told him at the men's shelter that he was no longer there because he got thrown out because the cops got called because he was writing bad checks in town. Wow. You know. And these things begin to pile up and pile up. And I'm so glad now that I didn't come after him, because no one could say then, well, the reason why I wrote the bad checks is because Alan got him fired from his job. I took the chance and I said, God, I'm going to trust you with this. And God took care of everything. And he'll do the same for you, Bryce. If people start making you mad and you feel, you know, hand it over to God, because it is not worth it. What would have happened if I had gotten involved in a situation and gotten him fired from his job? Then he could have went to the church and he could have done all these things. It probably would have damaged my reputation at church. It probably would have damaged my testimony. But I trusted God. God will protect his own. He will. You know, we have the choice to either hold on to our anger or to let go of it. A lot of our emotions are simply based on, how we deal with this is based on trust. It's based on letting go. It's based on things that we're actually in control of. I make the decision to stay in love with Michelle. She makes the decision to stay in love with me. Amy makes the decision to stay in love with your dad. You make the decision as a child to love your parents. It's not something you're born with. No one's born automatically to love somebody else. You know, we talk about, oh, love's a natural thing. Love is very unnatural, because when you're in a loving, when you're in any sort of relationship, father to son, husband to wife, you've got to let your boundaries down. You've got to let your walls down. You've got to be able to let people in. And we notice that this is everything that God's talking about here is unjustified anger. If you've got this, how can you enjoy that fellowship? How can you make the right decisions you need to do when it comes to your anger being taken care of? And that's where we're going to stop at. This time we'll pick up with this next Sunday. I want you to go ahead and close us in prayer, Bryce, if you don't mind.
Dear Lord, I want to thank you for this day you give us. I want to thank you for everything you do for us in the church and as families in the church. I want you to please keep your hand on Pastor as he makes his way to churches today and he travels home tonight. And just, if somebody has anything to tell you today, get it off their heart for you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.